Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolutely crucial life skill. We're going to figure out how to take massive, overwhelming amounts of information and distill them down to their purest essence, without losing a single drop of what makes them important. Honestly, it's a bit of an art form, but it's a science, too.
Think about this for a second. It takes you 2 whole hours to sit through a big action movie, right? Or maybe 6 to 10 days to get through a really sprawling novel. But when you're standing in the kitchen telling a friend what it was all about, how long does that take? 10 minutes? Maybe even less. You just naturally compress all that plot and excitement perfectly into a short, compelling pitch. That everyday instinct right there? That is exactly what we're going to formalize today.
Here's a quick roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the art of summarizing. Second, the 5 rules of a summary. Third, a step-by-step guide. Fourth, trimming the fat. And finally, putting it into practice.
All right, Section 1, the art of summarizing. Let's lay out the foundational concepts.
At its absolute core, a summary, or what the French call a précis, is basically a brief and clear statement in a connected and readable shape of the substance of a longer passage. The absolute most important word in that definition is substance. When you compress a large amount of information, your main job is to keep the big points in their support while completely ruthlessly dropping the minor details. You're shrinking the size for sure, but you absolutely have to keep the core substance intact.
So, why do we even care about doing this? Well, it's basically the ultimate mental workout. Whether you want to be a computer scientist, a teacher, or a lawyer, summarizing forces you to think clearly. We've all been trapped in a conversation with someone who just cannot tell a story without giving you every single agonizing detail, right? It's boring, and it happens because they haven't developed the mental muscle to go from particular tiny statements to general broad ones. They can't generalize. Summarizing trains your brain to express other people's ideas accurately and fast without leaving out the good stuff. It really is a superpower in any profession.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 5 rules of a summary. Let's talk about shrinking information.
So, there are 5 equally important pillars to a perfect summary. It's got to be brief, clear, connected, readable, and full of substance. But if you ever have to make a trade-off, clarity actually beats brevity. It is always better to be clear than it is to just be short, even though the two usually go hand in hand.
Speaking of being short, what's our actual target here? The golden rule is this ratio: 1/3. Your goal is usually to reduce the original text to exactly 1/3 of its original length. And yes, that counts even the tiniest words like a and the. It really forces you to pack a tremendous amount of meaning into as few words as humanly possible.
Let's see this in action, specifically that 3rd rule we mentioned, making it connected. Imagine reading a disjointed passage like this. Spare cattle were killed. Spices were used a lot. They came from the east. The Turks cut the line of supply. It's totally jerky and unconnected. Now, contrast that with the exact same facts, but with the links of thought preserved. Listen to this. Because people in the Middle Ages lacked scientific farming, spare cattle were killed. This unappetizing meat demanded spices, and one reason for the great voyages was the shortage of spices when Turks cut the route. See how smooth that is? You have to preserve the way ideas actually link together.
All right, Section 3, the step-by-step guide. Here is how we actually do it. Okay, grab a mental notepad, because here's your 5-step guide. Step 1, read the passage slowly. This is crucial, because writers love to use irony or sarcasm, which means they might be saying the exact opposite of what the literal words mean. If you skim too fast, you completely miss the true spirit of the text. Step 2, read it again, and this time, number the essential points in the margins. Step 3 is the most fun part. Strike out the non-essentials. Just cross out the repetitions, the random anecdotes, the bloated comparisons. Step 4, take those surviving points and arrange them in the most logical, convincing way you can. And finally, Step 5, write and polish your draft just as carefully as you would a full essay.
Section 4, trimming the fat. It's time to get rid of those roundabouts.
We all do this, but why on earth would you write an 11-word phrase like, boys whose way of life is cast in an urban environment, when you can literally just say town boys in 2 words? Urban just means town. Or how about together with the addition of? That's 5 words. You know what does the exact same job? The single word also. We fall into these traps constantly, especially when we're writing something formal and trying to sound smart. But really, we're just wasting everyone's time. Train yourself to spot these bloated phrases and cut them right down.
Let's look at a real-world example of this. Listen to this 34-word, highly bureaucratic nightmare of a sentence. Having regard to the recent increase in the number of cases of malaria in this area, it is clearly desirable that the scheme for the provision of more doctors should be put into effect. Wow. Now, let's get to the chase in just 19 words. The recent increase in the number of malaria cases in this area requires that more doctors should be posted. Stripping out all that fluff like having regard to and scheme for the provision of makes the urgent need for doctors vastly more clear.
And this brings us to a huge trap: repetition. People often mistakenly think that saying something twice makes it twice as impressive. But in reality, repetition shows weakness rather than strength. If a writer tells you a river is in continuous flood, and then follows it up with, "This state of affairs goes on for the whole of that time without cease," they aren't adding value, they're just filling up pages. Just say, "The river is in flood for 3 months, done." Don't water down your message by saying the exact same thing over and over.
Now for our final stop. Section 5, putting it into practice. Let's transform some paragraphs.
Sometimes you'll find a text that's actually well written, but it's just too long. You can't just hack out words. You have to gracefully weave separate ideas together. Imagine this 36-word monster. It was quite dark, for the sun had set an hour before, and the moon had not yet risen when the thief carefully opened the door of his house and prepared to go about his business. That's 5 clunky clauses. Now watch how we fold it all into one sleek 20-word sentence. An hour after sunset one dark, moonless night, the thief crept out of his house to go about his business. We didn't lose a single vital detail, we just combined the ideas beautifully.
Let's scale this up to a whole passage about 19th century factory workers. The original text lists out every single barbaric detail: 12 to 14-hour days, 7-day work weeks, cramped unsafe factories, marginal wages, no legal protection. But it also notes that poverty was so incredibly widespread, any job at all was welcome. So how do we summarize all that? We use the mental tool of generalizing. Instead of listing every awful detail, we sweep them all under one conceptual umbrella. The summary becomes: widespread poverty and unemployment made 19th century workers willing to put up with terrible working conditions. One sentence, absolutely perfect clarity.
Finally, consider a dense text from a psychology textbook discussing the functions of emotions. The original text gives these long, sprawling examples about an angry dog charging at us, how our fear triggers our nervous system to run away, how we learn to avoid similar situations, and how we might comfort someone else who's showing fear. It's a huge, overwhelming paragraph. But by pulling out just the main points and dropping the illustrative anecdote about the dog, we're left with 3 incredibly powerful bullet points. Emotions prepare us to take action, shape our future behavior, and regulate our social interaction. The entire textbook paragraph perfectly distilled into 3 lines.
We've covered a ton of ground today, right? From that magical 1/3 ratio rule to trimming the fat and generalizing massive ideas. Remember, summarizing isn't just about making text shorter. It is a serious mental workout that sharpens how you think, read, and write every single day. So I want to leave you with a provocative question as you go about the rest of your day. What unnecessary details are you going to stop over-explaining today? Think about that before you type up your next email or jump into your next meeting. Challenge yourself to get right to the core substance and just watch how much more impact your words are going to have. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you next time.